Welcome back to another episode of Legacy Battle. I am Michael Adams, my co-host tonight from the Gridiron Battle Zone, Brian King from Steelers Nation South, Rollo Coughlin. We have a career interview for you today. We are joined by an NFL cornerback out of Marshall. He played with the Vikings from 83 to 93 and finished that off with 1 year for the New Orleans Saints. He is a first-team All-Pro, three-time Pro Bowler, a member of the Vikings' 40th anniversary team, and the 50 greatest Vikings of all time. We want to welcome the great Carl Lee. Carl, thank you so much for coming on.
Guys, thanks for having me.
Excellent. Let's jump into our Q&A.
All right. So, Carl, you were born and raised South Charleston, West Virginia, then traveled across I-64 about 50 miles to the University of Marshall to play for the Herd. So could you tell us what those early years of football were like for you?
Well, it was interesting. Like my high school career, it was kind of average, but I didn't have a lot of folks recruit me. I took a visit down to Marshall prior to Sonny Randall getting the job, and I was like, I don't know if this is really where I want to go. And I literally had like places like Fairmont, like the WBSAIC conference teams was all that I had. I had gotten recruited by Virginia Tech. They ended up wanting me to walk on. I didn't have funds to do that. So then Sonny Randall came in, went down, and that was like a match made in heaven. He was a former NFL player. I wanted to be an NFL player. I signed like right off the bat. Like, as soon as I got down there, I signed while I was there. Didn't even come home to even have a major discussion about it.
So you end up a draft pick by the Minnesota Vikings in the seventh round. And boy, for a seventh rounder, you're one of the all-time steals in draft history there. But I want to talk to you about the 1984 Vikings. You guys go 3-13 under one season and done Coach Steckel. What do you think went wrong that year? Because the Vikings were coming off a really good run in the 70s, and in 84 it kind of just hit rock bottom there.
I think Les Steckel came in with just the wrong approach. There were still some of those players that had been either backups or was at the end of their career. Matt Blair, Fred McNeil, some of those kind of guys on the defense. And he essentially wanted this to be like a military kind of he treated it like a military. He took the military approach to it. And a lot of those guys, it was new. They had spent their entire career with Bud Grant. And as tough as Bud is, Bud doesn't necessarily, he puts it on you to be ready for camp. Les was not that kind of guy. He wanted to control everything. He wanted to control, he'd stand out on the corner at training camp, making sure that everybody was back in the dorm on time. Just stuff like that guys just was not used to. And it wasn't comfortable. Nobody got comfortable. And then we started just taking the L's, and it just got worse game after game. For me, it was a normal thing. That's kind of what my career was like at Marshall. But for a lot of those guys, some of those guys had been, college championships and hadn't lost 4 or 5 games in their career. And so they weren't used to it, and it just did not work.
Well, Carl, during your NFL career, the closest you got to playing on Super Bowl Sunday was during the '87 season when your Vikings got all the way to the NFC Championship game. That playoff run included a great divisional round upset at Candlestick. You were able to get a pick in that game, and you guys really clobbered the Niners. So what do you remember about that game, and what was the feeling like in the locker room afterwards, knowing you guys knocked off such a great team?
It was we had been so talked about against the 49ers, like there's no way you could win. This was like supposedly at that point in time the greatest team ever. And I think everybody just kind of got a chip on their shoulder, and being a corner, knowing that I'm going to be playing a ton of man-to-man, and I'm going against Jerry Rice, and I got Joe Montana as a quarterback. It was a challenge, but we got so hyped up and got tired of hearing the noise. we went out and we played. And like they say, any given Sunday, anybody can win. And, I would make the case that probably was Rice's worst statistical game that he had. I can't take credit for that by myself, but, the D-line, the linebackers, and the other guys that played in the secondary, we did a good job against him. Now, he killed us the next year, but that particular year, we had a chip on our shoulder because, we didn't get the respect to get into the playoffs, and then nobody thought we could win at all.
Carl, in 1988, you had 2 pick sixes, one of which was against Dan Marino, which spoiled a shutout by the Dolphins. Did you keep that football, and what do you remember most about that play? Tell us a little bit about what you saw.
I do. I have all of those. I actually got a game ball here in my house, in my little man cave where I am now. That was probably the biggest interceptions that I think that I had for whatever the reason, because they had Duper and Clayton, and they were quick throws and all those kind of things, and I was just happy to be able to think that I had got a pick six against that group, because everybody thought that would be very difficult to do.
So, Carl, for a 3-year period there, from 88 to 90, you were regarded as one of the very best cornerbacks league-wide. You made the All-Pro team. You were named to the Pro Bowl, both as a right-side cornerback and a left-side cornerback. To what do you owe your success to? And who were some of your main influences? I know that you had some great defensive minds like Pete Carroll and the late Monty Kiffin on that Viking staff.
Pete Carroll was like, in my first 3 years, it was kind of hit and miss. But when Pete came in and put in the bump and run, I can remember calling my mom and telling her, like, that I really think I can do this. It came to me really easy, and I was like, I just think that if I get a chance to get in, if I can get on the field, I think I can do this. And Pete gave me every chance to perfect it. And I believe that he actually trusted me with it. And once I got on the field, I loved it. I loved being up in the face of the receivers. I could run. I had decent size, so I got comfortable with it. And that particular season, or those particular seasons, I felt like this was what I could do. But when it comes to who did I look to? Robert Alexander from West Virginia. He was the best back in the nation, and he was the guy that I really looked up to. I didn't really have, there were some great DBs, but I didn't look to them. My guy was the guy that I grew up. He was just about 15 minutes from where I grew up, and I just saw him all the time. And his career was good. It wasn't maybe as long as he would have liked. He's passed away now, but he taught me the work ethic. He taught me that, you put in the time. If you put in the time, you'll get the results. And I stuck with that. And my off-season training was very difficult, and I was doing it on my own. And I can make the case, I know how difficult it was, because I tried it even in college when I was coaching. I tried to get some of the kids to do it, and it was difficult for them. So I was happy that I could. I had the opportunity to play for Pete Carroll. I had the opportunity to have somebody to influence me of knowing just how to work. And I learned to be a pro through Bud Grant on the other side of that, because, being on time. Sonny Randall, again, was that same kind of guy. He didn't want you to be late. So at some point, you have to realize these guys are telling you this. It must mean something. And to me now, long term, I realize exactly the importance of it.
Carl, you played 12 seasons in the NFL, faced some of the best receivers the game has ever seen: Sterling Sharp, Jerry Rice, Andre Reed. Who was your toughest matchup that you went against as an NFL quarterback?
Sterling Sharp, who is a buddy of mine, and his challenge was that he would not shut up in the game, and he would pick with I used to tell our guys in the secondary, like, don't listen to this dude, because he's gonna laugh you into a touchdown. He's gonna joke with you, he's gonna ask you questions, and I'm like lined up on him like in a bump and run. He said, it's a run, it's a run. And I'm trying like to ignore this dude. And fortunately or unfortunately, he made it very difficult to play because he was great anyway. And then he was the most comfortable person I'd ever seen play at that level of football. Like, you're at the pro level and you're laughing all the way through the game. You're creating jokes all the way through the game, and you're still one of the best receivers ever. That seemed impossible to me to do that. So I'm gonna give him that credit.
So in your time in Minnesota, 10 years there, you played for 4 different head coaches. How do you continue to adjust to new defensive systems that may not suit your skill sets?
And this is gonna sound really, really arrogant, but I made that switch. And I don't know if you're a DB, if you're a quarterback, if you're whatever position, I don't know any other one but DB. Coaches make changes, and you have to be able to make those changes. And if you say, I can't make that change, or if you get it in your head that you can't make that change, you're not going to make it. So to me, tell me what we're trying to do, and I can do that, because that's the role. I'm the player, they're the coach. I got to make that adjustment. If I can't, I know what the results are going to be.
So I can't talk to a Minnesota Viking and not ask about Hall of Famer Chris Doleman. What was it like to play with him? How did he lead that defense, and how could he just take over a game?
Chris Doleman, as we call him, Dole, was an amazing guy. And the crazy thing about it was he was a linebacker at Pitt, I think it was. But he ended up coming to D lineman. He didn't want to play. He didn't want to play that position. He kept saying he didn't want to play it. But once he got there, I mean, it was amazing. And then you put Henry Thomas at the nose tackle, Keith Millard at what we called our under tackle. I mean, those 3 guys were the pillar of what made our defense great. Chris Doleman, Hall of Fame guy. As an individual, he was a very, very confident guy, and wanted everybody to work hard. He just was a special kind of unique guy. He was a guy that you can't help but miss.
What was life after football for you like? Did you take up coaching? Did you get a mentoring? What did you do after football? And are you still involved with the game today?
I am still involved with it. I stayed in New Orleans one year, and then I got a call from a friend of mine here back in West Virginia. We were still in New Orleans. My wife and my son, we were still there. And a friend of mine called and asked if I'd be interested in coaching at West Virginia State. It's a historically HBCU, and I hadn't thought about coaching. It wasn't in my plans or anything. So I said, well, let me come back and take a look at it. So I came back, took a look at it. There wasn't a lot of money in the program. It wasn't winning. And I liked that challenge. So I decided to take it. I ended up coaching for 10 years. I was on campus for about 15 or 16 years doing different things. And from there, I ended up going to the city of South Charleston, which is where I grew up, and took over the youth sports program to oversee them. And that's what I do now. So we have football practice later on today, youth football. I don't coach. I just kind of make sure everything is good and everybody's doing all the right things and parents are doing the right thing, kids, coaches, and all that. So I'm still there, still into sports.
Ryan, do you have another one?
Yeah, I got another one. Yeah, Joey Browner. This guy, he was one heck of a safety. I always like I don't understand why the guy's not in the Hall of Fame yet. I mean, I feel like he had a Hall of Fame kind of career. Right? What do you think, Carl? Do you think Joey belongs up there?
I, there's two guys that I think that the Vikings. I don't know. I don't even know how the process necessarily works. Joey Browner and Chuck Foreman. Those are two players for the Vikings that I just don't understand how they're not in. And I don't I don't know Joey's stats when it comes to him and Ronnie Lott and Easley and all those kind of guys. I don't know those stats, but I can tell you that there was not a single team, not a single running back, not a single tight end, not a single receiver who did not know or try to figure out where Joey was going to be, because that's the dude that you didn't want to be around, because he was physical without even thinking about it. Like he's going to hit you, and he's not thinking like it's going to, like he's trying to do anything. He was just built automatically for physicality. And then he had the whole karate stuff going with him. I mean, he was a phenomenal player and literally played almost like a linebacker for us. It makes no sense to me that he could not have been a first ballot Hall of Famer to me. I don't know his stats, so I don't know if they're looking at the stats, but we all know stats don't necessarily stand up to what a player was, because everybody knew Joey Brown. When if you didn't game plan for him, even if you game plan, he's probably still going to hurt you, but you had to game plan against where he would be, how you get him away from the play that you're going to. I thought he was just a phenomenal player. And to this day, I just don't understand why he's not in.
I'm going to throw in one more too, and then Rollo, if you have another one, you can ask. So your time period when you played, I take a look around the league, and I think it's like the all-time high for corners. We got Darrell Green, we got Rod Woodson, Everson Walls, just to name a few. And then, of course, the safety position, you mentioned Ronnie Lott was out there, and Atwater, and just incredible time for the backfield. So when you would play against those guys, I know that they're on defense, so you're not on the field against them, but are you out there as a player comparing yourself, saying, I got to play as good as him tonight to stop their number one wide receiver and show them that, hey, I'm the man, not you?
I think that was on every corner's mind who whatever that, if you got that kind of recognition and you're playing against another guy that has that same kind of recognition, you watched how they played and you were hoping that your receivers could beat them. And then you'd hope to shut theirs down. I don't think it's what I'll even make it this way. I think it's still like a kid's game when it comes to that. Everybody's looking at the good player that's playing their position. And I felt like that during that time, I think everybody kind of does that. But on the other side of it, like, it was more important to be able to shut down their receivers versus them shutting down our receivers. And I was fortunate enough to have Anthony Carter to go against every single day in practice and playing him bump and run. And he was, man, because I really think he's another guy that I don't think gets his due. But he was great. And if I could get a hand on him, a finger on him, then I felt like I could maybe get, something on any of the other receivers. But there was that time for DBs, specifically corners. There were some great ones, and I'm just happy to be able to have played in that era and against those quarterbacks and those receivers, because there's nothing you can take away from any of those receivers, none of those quarterbacks. I mean, they're some of the greatest of all time.
Carl, you got to play with a young John Randall, one of the greatest defensive tackles of all time, and world-renowned trash talker. Was he really like that in the locker room? And Was he talking trash all the time?
I don't know if I've ever seen him not. Like how he is, how you see him, I don't know if I've ever seen him any different. And if so, before he showed up in practice, and when I mean showing up like he could play, he's a free agent and he's not very big, so okay, that's that guy. What's his name? John Randall. Okay, yeah. And then all of a sudden you get out on the field and you're like, wait a minute, who is that dude? What did he like? How did we get him? He's got to be a play. He's got to start. And like, he had more fun practicing and beating. Our O-line hated him. They hated him because like he would come into practice. He's got all the paint all over his face. So he's already, and he's yelling and screaming. And he's, again, here's a free agent dude walking out on the practice field. Yeah, let's go. Let's go. You gonna be ready. You better be ready, Laddermilk. Like, dude, this is not how this works. And then he gets on the line and he's blowing by these guys. And I'm like, whoa, wait a minute. What's going on here? And then he's talking smacking with it on top of it. And he ended up being like maybe one of the hated guys that, for the O-line until we got to Sunday. I mean, I can't imagine. And the only thing that I could justify why he kind of got looked over is maybe because of his initial size. But man, his speed and quickness and toughness and just craziness made him special. I don't think there's another player. I used to love watching football when I was a kid. Don't remember a guy like him. Maybe there was. I just don't remember a guy like him. Through my career after football, I don't think there's a guy that is anywhere remotely close to John Randall as a personality on the football field. Now, you can try to duplicate that. You can try to copycat that. I had never seen anything like that prior to him.
Well, thank you, Carl Lee, for joining us today. We appreciate you coming on.
Thank you, guys. I appreciate you having me.
Great interview, everyone. I hope you check this one out. Make sure you hit that like, subscribe, notification buttons. We'll see everybody next time. Have a great night. Clear. Got it. Thank you.
All right.